But to play devil's advocate a little bit here, which is maybe also a favorite card of some Russian media, though not only them, I mean, this idea of using propaganda, that's not unique to Russia. What is it that Russia does that really makes it different, or the way that it does it, I suppose?
Well, I think, their clever trick, if you like, is they understand that the Western media is duty-bound to report, quote, both sides of the story, right? I mean, there's a transparency and openness to the Western news cycle that there is not to the Russian news cycle, particularly now that independent media voices are being, completely eclipsed or silenced. So what I would say that Putin is very adept at doing is he seconds organizations like the BBC or the New York Times or the Washington Post, makes them unwitting and unwilling accomplices in the dissemination of misinformation. To give you one example that I like, when the chemical weapons attack in Syria was perpetrated in August of 2013, Alexander Lukashevich, the spokesman for the Foreign Affairs Ministry of Russia, said, "Oh, well, we can prove instantly that this whole thing was a hoax, or it was, staged for, by the rebels to try and draw Western intervention." And his evidence was the first YouTube video showing the alleged victims of this chemical attack had been uploaded before the attack itself. Now, what he didn't realize is YouTube runs on California time, not Damascus time. So the real story there is the Russian Foreign Ministry doesn't know that the Earth moves around the sun in daily fashion, except that this actually was picked up by the mainstream media and sort of put out there as, Russian Foreign Ministry says Ghouta attack staged. So the problem I have, or one of the sort of recommendations we put forward in the report is media can be a little more disciplined. It can exercise a little more restraint or better judgment in understanding that, look, you are, to the Kremlin, a dupe, a useful idiot, or a patsy. I mean, you are being used to put stuff out there and to kind of sow skepticism or doubt, or to inject some conspiracy.
So what do you do? I mean, is it a question of the media becoming more active and having more agency as opposed to just being fed things? Or what do they do? Because the point that you make is that these ideas of freedom of the press and being unbiased, that these have been abused and taken advantage of specifically by Russian state media for the purposes of propaganda and the interests of the state. So what needs to be built up to fight that?
Well, I think, ending a little bit of journalistic laziness when it comes to reporting on these issues, that can go a long way. And look, this is not to cast aspersions at some of the excellent reporting that's been done on Ukraine by Western journalists. I mean, I can name several off the top of my head who I think are just absolutely stellar in the field. But the problem is, as you well know, a reporter who reports, in Ukraine from, the Donbass or whatever, it doesn't end with him, right? He files his piece or she files her piece, then it goes through a series of sort of editorial cleansings or rejiggerings. It winds up in the hands of a sub-editor who comes up with the headline and the stand first of the article. Look, just yesterday, and I tweeted this, I said this is a perfect case in point. CBS News had a headline that says, Russia claims new satellite footage shows who downed MH17. This was a full day after that supposed counterclaim or that new narrative of how MH17 was down had been completely debunked and embarrassed, including by the guy who, this sort of MIT graduate who submitted this evidence to the Russian Foreign Ministry. So the whole story had fallen apart, and here you are. I mean, you have to understand, a general audience, whether in the West or anywhere, they see headlines, they see subheads. There is a psychological effect that these things have, right? Not everybody gets through an entire news story. The concept burying the lead. The thing that should actually be the real big story so often winds up in the second to last paragraph of a news clipping. So when, if media sort of begins to understand that, look, we are being enlisted in this kind of campaign, we don't like it because it embarrasses our professionalism, right? It serves the interests of a government when we're not supposed to be serving the interests of any government. A little bit of more discipline, a little more rigor and methodological soundness can go a long way. And again,
But what does that mean? That means, stepping back from when you get the story and then saying, we'll hold off on this a minute, or this is real information? What kind of rigor is needed, or what standards?
Well, I was about to say, the Lukashevich thing, that's something that you don't need a specialism in Russia to understand. That's literally knowing YouTube runs on California time versus Syria time.
Right,
that's
sure.
Prima facie, So looking at this stuff and saying, let's be very candid here. I work in journalism, you work in journalism. We deal with sources all the time. And one of the difficulties of our trade is knowing who to trust, right? Sometimes people spin you, sometimes they lie to you. But if you have a source, and all that person does to you is lie and dissimulate and embarrass you, right? All that person is giving you is stuff designed to serve his or her agenda. Eventually that person ceases to be a source, or if you have to quote or cite them, you do so in a way that makes it clear